Okay, so I know I said that I was going to do a video on Terry Funk, but as I thought about it more, people have already done it and they've done it better than I could ever do it. So instead, I am going to talk about D&D and more specifically what I would do if I was in charge of making the books, right? If I took over Wizards of the Coast, what the fuck, right? What the fuck am I doing? So, first thing you do, first things first, right? I'm not covering adventure modules. I have plenty of ideas, but that can be its own fucking video at some point, maybe. I don't know. I'm more covering settings, monster manuals, that sort of thing. The more general purpose books. The book that anyone can fucking use, not just people who aren't as creative. Let's put it that way. And don't get me wrong, if you run adventure modules, good for you. If that's what your group enjoys, good for you. I'm saying I don't enjoy it. I think it's kind of a crutch, to be honest, but whatever. Anyway, first thing, Player's Handbook, DM's Guide, Monster Manual. Now, a couple changes. One, these would be setting agnostic, i.e., everything in there would be very general purpose, right? Your lore for your races would be general purpose. Your lore for your classes would be general purpose. And the classes would be the same as 5th edition, plus a mystic, because you need someone to cover psionics, and I like the name. I don't like the execution of the class. The class needs to be tinkered with and made less OP. But otherwise, I would keep it the same. You would also still have the Artificer, because yes, that worked. After that, the first setting I would release is Forgotten Realms. And each setting would get a player's handbook, a DM's guide, and a monster manual that you could buy as a box set or individually, depending on what you wanted to do. And these would have unique races, monsters that are, as well as sub races for the already existing, creatures for already existing things that would tie into, that would be specific to the Forgotten Realms. But could still be used in other settings if you wanted, but there you go. The next setting then would be Greyhawk, same thing. And then you would have a book that focuses in on dragons. And you would see the different types of dragons that aren't the chromatic, metallic, or gem dragons, which would already exist. Things like the Ferris dragons, the Lung dragons. Basically, pick any kind of dragons. Of course, there would be dragons in pretty much every setting book as well, but for the sake of this, more types of dragons, more unique dragons, right? After this, you would have a second player's handbook, DM guide, and monster manual, which would be more static, which would be more setting agnostic stuff that can be used in any setting no matter what. So think of it like a lot of it would be reprints with a lot of the setting specific stuff taken out. And you basically keep going like that indefinitely. After that, you would have Dragonlance and Mystara release, followed by a book similar to the book about dragons, but this one would be giants, and would cover various different types of giants that do not already exist. This would be followed by another player's handbook, monster manual, and DM's guide, which would again have a lot of the same stuff, but without all the setting specific shit, because we need less setting specific shit. After this, you would add in Birthright and Eberron as settings. And again, races, classes, races and subclasses would be the primary thing in the player's handbooks. The DM guide would have magic items and anything else. And the monster manual would be, I don't know how many pages the monster manual actually is, but every monster manual would be that length. Every book would be the same fucking length. So you have the same amount of shit to work with. And then after that, you'd have another book, basically a monster archetype book, which would be the Book of the Fae, which will focus on Fey creatures. So think the various Archfey getting stat blocks. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking of here. After this, you'd have another Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, and DM's Guide, followed by Ravenloft and Dark Sun, getting added as settings, and same thing for that. And for Ravenloft, I'd also release a free pamphlet that has all the various Dark Lord stat blocks, but they're separate. So if you don't want to use the Dark Lords or you want to make your own, they're not taking up space in the monster manual, but they're there if you want them, and if you don't, do what you want, right? After that, you'd have a Book of Fiends, which would be demons, devils, Yukalofs, all of that. And anything else that comes from the lower planes, basically, would be encompassed in that book, and you'd have a bunch of new stuff there. After that, another Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, DM Guide. This is number 5 now. And again, a lot of it could be reprints. Put some new stuff in there to sell it, but basically all reprints from the setting books to make them more setting agnostic. After this, you would have Spelljammer and Planescape, i.e. the weird ones, because put those two together towards the end. Followed by a Book of Elementals, which would be the same thing but with elementals, so you could have a lot of shit there. I mean, that would be fun. It could also serve as a guide to the elemental planes, because, yeah. From there, another Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, DM's Guide, followed by Natir Vale being the final setting, or at least the final one that's D&D. If Critical Role want to write another Xandria book or whatever, they can do that, but I didn't include that here because we don't own that. Beyond that, you would have another book that would be the Book of the Undead, basically, and you'd also have Guide to the Feywild and Shadowfell. Again, you could roll those in the Book of the Fey. You could roll that one into the Book of the Fey if you want to, and just have Guide to the Shadowfell. And again, both of these would have new monsters. My big focus is adding lots of new monsters. And then you would have a final Player's Handbook, DM's Guide, and Monster Manual. And mind you, that does not take into account all of the adventure paths and possible Magic the Gathering tie-ins. I'm not as well versed in Magic the Gathering, and I don't think they could hold up free books. That's why I didn't include them in this particular plan. Now, if you wanted to, you could cut out the DM's Guide. I will say that, but for me, just do all free, and then you have everything everybody needs, and then you can just tell the players the only thing you need to buy are Player's Handbooks. Right? And they don't have to try to avoid reading the DM stuff. And they're only reading, the stuff they need to know, right? Other than that, basically, after that, to be honest, you move on to another edition and do it all over again, and you would keep doing this ad nauseum until the heat death of the universe, because the real point would be the adventure paths, which I'd have them taking place in different settings. I wouldn't specifically just have them taking place in one, like the current situation. I think there's only like one book that does. There's like, 2 adventure books that don't take place in Forgotten Realms. And that annoys me to no end. Like, seriously, people. So that would be the other thing, is I'd spread it out over all the settings. Which would mean less progression in each setting, but probably only a few adventures for each setting, but, that way everyone has something, right? And I'll be honest, Dragonlance is one you might not get, so if not, just move Natir Vale up. But I threw Dragonlance in because why not? And then beyond that, to be honest, you could probably just make a new setting, too. if you wanted to, or throw in Magic the Gathering, and if Critical Role want to write more books, go ahead. Obviously, that stuff I can't really predict that you necessarily want to do, nor do I know you necessarily want to. But if that's something you wanted to do, fine. Other than that, that's it. I'm done. Ta-ta.